have to say that I do believe Berlin is now my favorite place. Because y'all are so good. Whether you waited, whether you left and came back, I am incredibly grateful. And when we saw that we were going to be hour and a half, 2 hours late, whatever it is, I said, well, we can't cancel. Because even if 5 of you had shown up, I was going to be here and talk to 5 of you. Because I just wanted you to know, 1, I appreciate you. 2, the North Country matters to us. We are not giving up on the North Country. And 3, we wanted to make sure that we gave you the opportunity to talk to us. How many of you are hearing me speak in a town hall setting for the first time? See, it was so worth me coming to Berlin, so I appreciate that. Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then we will talk about the situation in our country and how to save her. I was born and raised in a small rural town in South Carolina. 2,500 people, 2 stoplights. You couldn't think about doing something wrong without somebody already telling your mom. My mom started a business out of the living room of our home. 30-plus years later, it was a successful business. I started doing the books for the family business when I was 13. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized that was child labor. I'm not an Ivy Leaguer. I went to a public university. I went to Clemson University. Go Tigers. I graduated with a degree in accounting. Accountants are problem solvers. And then I went on and worked in the corporate world for a while. And I came back home to the family business. And one day I happened to be sitting with my mom, telling her how hard it was to make $1 and how easy it was for government to take it. And my mom said, quit complaining about it, do something about it. I truly did not know you weren't supposed to run against a 30-year incumbent in a primary. Ignorance is bliss. I had never been politically active before. Once I realized he was related to half the district, my only option was to win. So I went around the district and I said, we've got way too many lawyers at the State House. I think it's time they had a really good accountant. And the district took a chance on me and we won. When I got to the State House, my focus was on small businesses. I believe small businesses are the heartbeat of our economy. And if you take care of them, you take care of so much of our economy. And so that was really how I spent the first 3 or 4 years in the State House. But in South Carolina, most things are voted on by a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. But one day the legislature pushed through a bill that would give themselves a pay raise. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, silence. The ayes have it. Yet to this day, you can't find anyone that says they voted themselves a pay raise. I was furious because we had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor. So I filed a bill that said anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate is important enough for the people to know how their legislators voted. And the Speaker of the House said, put the bill away. We don't need to have it. We will decide what the public needs to see and what they don't. Long story short, when I wouldn't put the bill away, when I continued to tell the people of South Carolina what was happening, they stripped me of everything. I lost all my seniority. I was demoted off of all of my committee assignments. I could take the well, no one would hear me speak. I could sponsor a bill, no one would co-sponsor. So I ran for governor. And I'm proud to say one of the first bills we signed into law is now in South Carolina. Anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate requires a legislative vote on the record, and we took it a step further and did it on every section of the budget. And I love music, and you were listening to my playlist for a very long time. And so on the day of the bill signing, we blasted throughout the State House Pat Benatar's "Hit Me With Your Best Shot." When I became governor, South Carolina was hurting. We had 11% unemployment. We had thousands of people on welfare. And South Carolina was the butt of the jokes. And we got to work. By the time I left, we were building planes with Boeing. We were building more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought in Mercedes-Benz. We brought in Volvo, 5 international tire companies. They were referring to South Carolina as the beast of the Southeast, which I love. We announced jobs in every county in the state. We moved our unemployment level from 11% down to 4%. And we acknowledged some truths. We said if you have to show picture ID to buy Sudafed, if you've got to show picture ID to get on a plane, you should have to show picture ID to protect the integrity of the election process. And we passed voter ID in South Carolina. We passed one of the toughest illegal immigration laws in the country. We passed tort reform. We built up our coffers. We did pension reform. We paid down our debt. We cut taxes. But overall, by the time I left, South Carolina was named the friendliest state in the country. It was named the most patriotic state in the country. And it was named the #2 state in the country people were moving to. And then I got the call to go to the United Nations. And my honest answer was, I don't even know what the UN does. I just know everybody hates it. And I wasn't wrong about that. But when I got to the United Nations, it was important that countries knew what America was for and what America was against. I didn't care if they didn't like me, but I wanted them to respect America. So we got to work. We pulled ourselves out of the Iran deal. We moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. We passed the largest set of sanctions against a country in a generation against North Korea and got them to stop testing ballistic missiles. We cut $1 billion off the budget. We got ourselves out of the farce that was the Human Rights Council. We stopped giving American taxpayer money to the Palestinian Refugee Organization. And we did so much more. But the best thing that we did when we were at the UN was we took the kick me sign off of our backs. And America was respected again. Now I'm running for president, and I don't need to tell you how bad things are. You don't have to turn on the news to see it. You feel it when you go to the grocery store. You feel it when you go to the gas station. Everything that you have to pay, from your mortgage to your insurance to everything in between, it's all gone up. And I would love to tell you that Biden did that to us. But I've always spoken in hard truths, and I'm going to do that with you tonight. Our Republicans did that to us too. You go back and look at that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill that they passed with no accountability. They expanded welfare that has now left us with over 80 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. That's a third of our country. And did Republicans try and make it right? Nope. They doubled down and opened up earmarks and pet projects for the first time in 10 years, pushing through 7,000 of them last December. Want to know how they spent your money? $30 million on an honors college in Vermont, $10 million on a courthouse in Colorado, $7.5 million to tear down a hotel in Alaska. And the list just keeps going on. In the 2024 appropriations budget, Republicans put in $7.4 billion worth of pet projects and earmarks. Democrats put in $2.8 billion. Now you tell me who the big spenders are. All while 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bill. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. Our homeless level has gone up by 12%. We now have 650,000 Americans who are homeless. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. Then you look at our education system, and everybody wants to blame COVID for education. We had problems with education before COVID. Do you know right now in America, only 31% of 8th graders in our country are proficient in reading? 31%. Only 27% of 8th graders in our country are proficient in math. If we don't do something and do something quick, we're going to be in a world of hurt 10 years from now. And then you look at our border. I've run out of things to say about our border. It is a complete dereliction of duty. Now, I've been to the border, and I didn't pull a Kamala, go and come back. I went 400 miles down that border. You're not ready for what I saw. Mounds of shoes, mounds of clothes, paraphernalia, rape areas that the women and girls have to walk through. When you get up in the morning, you get your coffee and you watch the news. When these ranchers get up in the morning, they get their coffee and they go see if anybody died crossing the fence. They pick up whatever little kids are left behind and turn them over to Border Patrol. I met with multiple sheriffs. They said before 7 a.m., they round up whatever illegal immigrants they can find. They turn them over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol documents them and releases them until their court date years from now. And when I asked Border Patrol about their jobs, they said, you want to know what we do? We're glorified babysitters. They don't let us do our job. 8 million illegal immigrants have come to that border. We had more fentanyl come to the border last year that would kill every single American. Number one cause of death for adults 18 to 45? Fentanyl. And don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing when they send it over. And then my parents always taught me that you take care of those who take care of you. I'm going to ask you if we're taking care of those who take care of us. Right now in America, over 35,000 of our veterans are homeless. 1 in 3 veterans suffers from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We lose 22 heroes a day to suicide. If a veteran needs a doctor's appointment, on average, it takes 29 days. Why 29 days? Because on the 30th day, they can go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. So midway through the 29 days, they get a call to reschedule, and the clock starts all over again. It's shameful how we treat our veterans. And you look at D.C., and you see Congress, and what are they getting done for you? Anything? Do you know Congress has one job? It's to pay for government, right? Do you know they've only submitted a budget on time 4 times in 40 years? 4 times in 40 years. When I'm president, I think we change that. If they don't get us a budget on time, they don't get paid. No budget, no pay. We'll put an end to that. And don't you think it's finally time we had term limits in Washington, D.C.? Don't you think we need to have mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 75? Now, let me say this. I'm not being disrespectful when I say that. We all know people who can run circles around us that are over 75. But right now, Congress is the most privileged nursing home in the country. These are people making decisions on our national security. These are people making decisions on the future of our economic policy. We need to know that we've got people at the top of their game. So that's a lot of bad, right? It's hard to find anything good. But now I'm going to tell you what I told South Carolinians when I became governor. No more whining. No more complaining. Now we get to work. How do we fix it? First of all, we start by clawing back to over $150 billion worth of unspent COVID dollars that are still out there. Secondly, instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after Middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud. 1 out of every $7 was spent fraudulently. If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing. Cut up the credit cards. You have to balance a budget every day. I had to balance a budget as governor. Why is Congress the only group that refuses to balance a budget? We'll stop the spending, we'll stop the borrowing, and I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That will save us trillions. We're going to go to our agencies, and every federal program we can, we're going to send them down to the state level. that will reduce the size of the federal government, but it will empower people on the ground. Think education, think healthcare, think welfare, all of those things being handled at the state level instead of some DC bureaucrat. And then we want to make sure we open things up for the middle class. Right now in America, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is disappearing. That's why we're going to eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax in this country. That's why we're also going to cut taxes on the middle class and simplify those brackets. And we're going to make the tax cuts on small businesses permanent. They made corporate tax cuts permanent, but they made small business tax cuts temporary. We're going to make the small business tax cuts permanent as well. And we're going to roll back all of Biden's green subsidies, $500 billion worth. Once we start doing all of those things, that's when we'll start to get our economy back on track. Then when it comes to education, we knew in South Carolina if a child couldn't read by 3rd grade, they were 4 times less likely to graduate high school. So we started holding those kids back. We brought in reading remediation plans. We brought in their parents. We set them up for success. We will do that all over our country. We have got to get our kids reading again. The second thing is we need to make sure that no parent ever wonders what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. We need complete transparency in the classroom. As parents, we have one job, and that's to make sure we do right by our kids. That's why every parent across this country needs to be able to decide where their child goes to school or how they get educated. We know our kids best. And then let's start building things in America again. Let's put vocational classes back into our high schools. In South Carolina, we had apprenticeships all over our state. We taught our kids how to build the things we were making. That got them invested in our economy before they even finished school. And then, as a point of personal privilege, for all you girl dads out there and all you strong moms, we have to raise strong girls because strong girls become strong women and strong women become strong leaders. And none of that happens if you have biological boys playing in girls' sports. We've got to cut that out. And then when it comes to our border, we'll take what I did in South Carolina and we'll take it national. We'll do a national E-Verify program that requires businesses to prove that the people they hire are in this country legally. We will defund sanctuary cities once and for all. No more safe havens in America. We'll put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We will go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that no one even steps foot on U.S. soil to begin with. And then we're going to make sure that we, instead of catch and release, we go to catch and deport. That's what will stop the bleeding that's happening at the border. And when it comes to our veterans, we all know the images of when our men and women are deployed and the tears that are shed. And then we see the images of when they come back home to us and the prayers that are answered. I'm the wife of a combat veteran. My husband deployed to Afghanistan. The day he came back home to us was prayers answered. But that was the easy part. The hard part's when we got home. I know, I'm sorry. Do we know what's going on over there? Come on, guys, you make it hard for people to like you when you do stuff like that. All right. The hard part was when we got home. Michael couldn't hear loud noises. He couldn't be in crowds. Life had passed him by for the year that he was gone, and the transition was tough. we can't just love our men and women when they're gone. We got to love them when they come back home too. And the only way we do that is if we focus more on the transition. You can't just do 2 weeks and say they're done. We should have telehealth so that they get the mental health care they need right when they need it. They should be able to go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. They've earned that right. And I think the way we take care of veterans' health care, I think every member of Congress should get their health care from the VA. And you watch how fast they fix that VA health system. You know I'm right. Trust me, it will be the best health care we've ever seen, guaranteed. And then there were 2 things that I saw at the United Nations that Russia, China, and Iran never wanted us to have. They never wanted us to have a strong military, and they never wanted us to be energy independent. We won't just be energy independent, we will be energy dominant. We've got to get the EPA out of the way. Right now, they care more about sagebrush lizards than whether we can afford our utility bills. We need to speed up our permitting process, speed up our pipelines, make sure that we're focused on exporting as much liquefied natural gas as we can. It should be an all-of-the-above energy approach. No more going hat in hand to Saudi Arabia. No more getting dirty oil from Iran or Venezuela. When we focus on that, we turn our energy sector into an economic powerhouse. That's what we need to be doing, not just enough, but more than enough, so that it's actually fueling our economy in the process. We have the ability to do that. So we have the answers to the domestic policy issues. Now let's talk about national security. The world is on fire. Literally. You've got a war in Europe. You've got a war in the Middle East. North Korea just tested an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of reaching the United States. You've got China on the march. But make no mistake, none of that would have happened had we not had that debacle in Afghanistan. The idea that my husband and his military brothers and sisters had to watch America leave Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that told our enemies. And now what are you hearing out of Congress? Congress is saying, do you support Ukraine? Or do you support Israel? Do you support Israel? Or do you support securing the border? Don't let them lie to you like that. That's a false premise. They're not being honest, and they know it. Let's take it one at a time. Let's start with Ukraine. You should know that at the United Nations, Ukraine was one of our best friends. They voted with us on almost everything. They supported every initiative, whether I asked them to or not. Here you have this pro-American, freedom-loving country who was invaded by a thug. 500,000 people have been wounded or killed because of Putin. Now, for those of you who ask, why should we care about Ukraine? That's a legitimate question for you to ask. You should want to know why we should care about Ukraine. The reason you care about Ukraine, and I saw this at the United Nations, dictators, thugs, and terrorists always tell you what they're going to do. They're amazingly transparent. Hamas said they were going to make their way into Israel. China said they were going to take Hong Kong. We watched it. Russia said they were going to invade Ukraine. It happened. China says Taiwan is next. We better believe them. Russia has said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries, and then we're at war. This has always been about preventing war. That's what we should always do, is prevent war. And the thing is, Putin's hit rock bottom. We know that. They have lost 87% of the troops they started the war with. Russia's raised the draft age now to 65. They're getting drones from Iran, and they're getting missiles from North Korea. Putin knows he's in a bad spot. Now, I will tell you, I don't think we should ever give any country cash, friend or foe, because you can't follow it and you can't see how it's spent. I don't think we need to put troops on the ground, and the Ukrainians don't want our help with troops. They want to win this on their own. But I think we need to give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. Now, if we do that, if we support Ukraine, that's only 3.5% of our defense budget. That's it, 3.5%. The Europeans have put in more than that, and they should. That's their neighborhood. Now let's go to Israel. I'm haunted by what happened on October 7th. And the reason I'm haunted is because 5 years ago I gave a speech at the UN. And I talked about the fact that we knew there were maps. And these maps were held by Hamas. And it showed that if they could break through that barrier, it was how they were going to kill as many Jews as fast as they could. And it happened. Now, for those of you that ask, why should we care about Israel? Israel is a bright spot in a tough neighborhood. They are the tip of the spear when it comes to defeating terrorism. It has never been that Israel needs America. It has always been that America needs Israel. And remember, on that horrific day, when they beheaded those people and burned those babies alive and took those girls from the concert and raped them and dragged their naked bodies through the streets of Gaza, what did they say? Death to Israel, death to America. That's why you care about Israel as much. Some other candidates say, that's Israel's war, that's not ours. This should be personal to us. 33 Americans were butchered on that day. They're American hostages now. Remember when I told you that Putin had hit rock bottom? On that horrific day, October 7th, that day is Putin's birthday. Who's the happiest man in the world right now? Putin. Why? Because the U.S. and the West that were looking at Ukraine and sending everything to help them, what'd we do? We turned and started looking at Israel. It's exactly what Putin wanted. And how did Putin respond? Did he call Netanyahu in Israel? Nope, not for 10 days. You know who he did call? Hamas. The very next day, and invited them to Russia, and they came and held hands as friends. See the connection for what it is. Now, if we support Ukraine and we support Israel, that's only 5% of our defense budget. Now, the other option Congress gives you, securing our border. That should be priority number one. Southern border, northern border. We should be securing our borders. We are a country of laws. The second you stop being a country of laws, you give up everything this country was founded on. Right now, America's acting like it's September 10th. We better remember what September 12th felt like, because it only takes one. We had 250,000 illegal immigrants come to the border in November. 17 of them were on the terrorist watch list. Now, if we support Ukraine and we support Israel and we secure the border, that's less than 20% of Biden's green subsidies. So don't let them tell you that you have to choose. You don't have to choose. What we want And what Congress is always supposed to step up and do is provide national security, keeping Americans safe, preventing wars. That's always the goal of what we should try and do. That is Congress's job. Now, remember prior to the Olympics when China and Russia held hands and named themselves unlimited partners? They wanted the whole world to see that. And then Russia invaded Ukraine. And what'd they do? They held hands again. Our number one national security threat is China. China has been preparing war with us for years, and that's not exaggerating. They're already here. They've already infiltrated our country. They've bought 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base, where our most sensitive drone technology is. They put millions of dollars into our universities, stealing our research, spreading Chinese propaganda. Everybody got upset with the Chinese spy balloon that Biden tried to hide from all of us, right? What about the fact that 90% of our law enforcement drones in America are Chinese? Think about all the mini surveillance that's happening now. There's certain technologies that build up Chinese military that threatens America. Yet the Biden administration approved 70% of it last year. The Trump administration approved even more than that. We've lost more Americans to fentanyl than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined. 75,000 Americans last year alone. And China is building up their military at a scary pace. They now have 500 nuclear warheads. That's 100 more than they had last year. They have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 370 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. They're doing cyber, they're doing space, they're doing artificial intelligence. They've developed hypersonic missiles. We've barely gotten started. And now China's the lead developer on neurostrike weapons. Weapons engineered to change the brain activity of military commanders and segments of the population. That's who we're dealing with. So don't let Biden and Yellen tell you China is a competitor. I dealt with China every day at the United Nations. They never saw us as a competitor. They always saw us as an enemy. We have to look at them the way they look at us. But there are ways to deal with them. And that starts by stopping the sale of any U.S. land to China and taking back the land they've already purchased. We go to our universities and we say, you either take foreign money or you take American money, but the days of taking both are over, and you get that foreign influence out of our universities. We go and we blacklist every bit of technology that builds up China's military and threatens America. And we go to China and we say, we're going to end all normal trade relations with you until you stop murdering Americans with fentanyl. You watch how fast they move because they need our economy. And then we focus on building up our military. Strong militaries don't start wars. Strong militaries prevent wars. And that doesn't mean throwing a bunch of money at the Department of Defense. It actually means cleaning it up, getting rid of the bureaucracy, getting rid of the slowness, getting rid of the programs that the Department of Defense has no business focusing on. And that includes, for goodness sake, we have got to end these gender pronoun classes that they're doing in the military. It's killing the morale of our military. We have to modernize our military. We've got too many generals looking at wars of the past. Land, air, and sea, yes, that's fine. But we need to be focused on artificial intelligence and cyber and space and hypersonic missiles and submarines. Those are the ways that we have to look at going forward. So to turn all of this national security into one spot, there's a reason the Taiwanese want the U.S. and the West to support the Ukrainians. Because they know if Ukraine wins, China won't invade Taiwan. There's a reason the Ukrainians want America and the West to support Israel, because they know if Iran wins, Russia wins. Russia, China, and Iran are bound together in an unholy alliance that hates democracy, that hates freedom, and above all things, they hate America. We can win. We can become strong again, but you don't do it by putting your head in the sand. You do it by letting them know we're back. And that's what we'll do. But in order to do all of these things, so that's the domestic and the national security side, in order to really start this gaining back of our strength, we have to end this national self-loathing that's taken over our country. The idea that people say America's bad or rotten or racist. I was elected the first female minority governor in history. America's not racist, we're blessed. Our kids need to know to love America. They need to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance when they start school every day. You know, 6 months ago, I dropped my husband Michael off at 4 a.m. for another year-long deployment. And I watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings to go to a country they'd never been, all in the name of protecting America. They're willing to sacrifice their lives and their families because they still believe in this amazing experiment that is America. So if they're willing to sacrifice for us there, shouldn't we be willing to fight for America here? Because we have a country to save. But in order to do that, we have to acknowledge some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That is nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. But the only way we're going to win the majority of Americans is if we have a new generational leader that leaves the negativity and the baggage in the past and takes on these new issues of the future. Another hard truth. I believe President Trump was the right president at the right time. I support a lot of his policies. But rightly or wrongly, chaos follows him. You know I'm right. Chaos follows him. And we can't be a country in disarray and a world on fire and go through 4 more years of chaos. We won't survive it. Do you remember when you were growing up? Do you remember how simple life was? Do you remember how safe it felt? It was about faith, family, and country. Your parents raised you to be responsible individuals. You went to school and you learned what you needed to be successful. You went to church or your place of worship and you found your faith and your conscience. Don't you want that again? Because we could have that again. But in order to do that, it's going to take a lot of courage. Courage from every single person in this room. Courage for me to run. And courage for every one of you to know. Don't complain about what happens in a general election if you don't play in this primary. If you look at all the head-to-head polls, every single one of them, you see Biden and Trump are pretty much head-to-head. On a good day, he'll be up 2 points. In Wall Street Journal, he was up 4, margin of error. I'm in every one of those general election polls. And I defeat Biden by double digits. Wall Street Journal, I beat him by 17 points. Do you know what that means? That means that's more than just the presidency. That's governorships. That's the Senate. That's the House. That's a mandate going into D.C. to say we're going to stop all this crazy spending and get our economy back on track. That's a mandate saying we're going to get our kids reading again and take our schools back to the basics. That's a mandate that says we're going to secure our borders, no excuses. That's a mandate for law and order and to support what this country was meant to be. And that's a mandate on a strong America that we can be proud of. We can do this. You know we can do this. And all the commentators on TV are going to tell you, oh, but he can't be beat. You know better. You've done this before. You know you make the headlines. You don't listen to the headlines. That's always been what New Hampshire's done. And this press pool has been nice enough to follow me for months. And they can tell you that whenever I'm in a town hall, I don't talk about my opponents because I think you want to hear about the solutions, and I'd rather talk about the solutions. But you know, I've seen the commercials that you're seeing. And if my opponents hit me and lie about me, I'm going to tell you the truth about them. So right now, Trump has got an ad that said, I raise taxes. I never raise taxes. It's been fact-checked from everybody from Newsmax to CNN. I never raise taxes in my state. We cut taxes. We cut taxes on small businesses. We cut taxes on veterans. If there was any tax that was proposed, I said there had to be a greater tax cut. We never put taxes on anyone, ever. And I don't think government ever needs to do that. This is the live free or die state. I want to make it a live free or die country. Americans are tired of working for government. Government needs to now start serving Americans again. Donald Trump, on the other hand, proposed raising your gas taxes by 25 cents when he was president. I'm telling you, I want to eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax. But it's okay. If they have to lie about me, that means we're surging. That means we're doing something. That means we're gaining traction. You know, when someone asked me why I was running, when I announced, I said my parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that country again. I'm doing this for my husband Michael and his military brothers and sisters. They need to know their sacrifice matters. They need to know that we love our country. I'm doing this for my daughter who just got married, and I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. The average homeowner in America now is 49 years old. The American dream's getting further and further apart. And I'm doing this for my son because he's a senior in college, and I'm tired of watching him have to write papers of things he doesn't believe in just to get an A. That's not us. That's not America. And for the first time, 81% of Americans don't think their kids are going to live as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. I'm not okay with that. We have a country to save. But I will promise you this. If you will join with me in this fight, if you will join with me in this movement to save America, I promise you our best days are yet to come. Thank you very much. God bless you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Well, y'all have been so nice to sit and listen to me. Now we're going to turn the mics on you. We are going to open it up for questions. There is nothing I won't answer. You may not like my answer, but there's nothing I won't answer. I have, how many mics do we have? 2? I've got 2 microphones. If you just hold your hands up high, they will come find you, and then you could ask your question. Yes, sir.
Okay. Ambassador Haley, first of all, thank you for coming here.
Of course.
I think you'd make a great president. I think by unifying the country, I think that would be awesome. I also think I have a large group of friends across the political spectrum, and you're an acceptable candidate to many of them, which sort of is consistent with your recognizing the polls of how well you would do against President Biden. And I also think you'd be a great role model for my 2 little girls. I got a 4- and 5-year-old.
Oh, girls love their dads. Don't forget, girls love their dads.
So my question is this. I would like you just to, I agree with your platform across the board. As a father of 2 young girls, I'm very concerned about the fentanyl and drug issue. Just as far as a comparison, could you elaborate a little bit more on what exactly you would do? Yep. Maybe compare and contrast with Governor DeSantis. I did hear him speak, and I do like that the teeth he puts into, targeting the border and fentanyl. And I just was wondering whether you could, whether it's something you agree with.
So you saw we were going to put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground. We're going to go to China and tell them we're going to end all normal trade relations with them until they stop sending fentanyl. You can deal with it on the border. I want to go to where it's starting. China knows what they're doing. They have to pay a price for that. And then we'll send our special operations into Mexico to make sure that we take out every bit of production facilities that's doing it. Mexico has proven they're not going to deal with it. If they don't deal with it, we have to deal with it. Our special ops can go in there and take out the cartels and take out the ways that they're going about producing that. We have to hit this. They're killing millions of Americans at this rate, and we have to make sure they know we're not going to put up with it anymore. So it is whatever it takes to get it done. Thank you. Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Please, what was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? I'm sorry? I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of the people are. And I will always stand by the fact that I think government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people. Government doesn't need to tell you how to live your life. They don't need to tell you what you can and can't do. They don't need to be a part of your life. They need to make sure that you have freedom. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way. What do you want me to say about slavery? Next question. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you for coming to Berlin. We're far north. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from here. So
it's a beautiful part, though. It really is.
So I have a 2-part question. So one of the popular movies this summer was about the Manhattan Project. And you talked about energy independence. And so what would you consider another Manhattan-type project for nuclear fusion so that we could get government to fund the colleges and the engineers to have a nuclear fusion program where we could make affordable energy dirt cheap for everybody and give it to the world as a gift to the world? It's feasible. If Fizzorg is a website, you can find the information at Fizzorg. And
I've seen the nuclear fusion that they're talking about that actually helps the environment.
It's attainable, and it takes Cortez and her whatever that posse is, out of the equation with the green, with Gore and everybody else. It takes the whole green environment, energy, right out of it. It decimates them. It ends it right there. If we had a nuclear fusion problem, it's the answer to America's energy independence. You're always going to have the fracking and everybody else that's against everything. That was the first part. If you were president of the United States, would you launch a Manhattan-style project to get nuclear fusion attainable and so that we could provide energy to, because energy is business. The cost of energy is directly related to business. The cheaper energy is, the better businesses are, the more profitable. Second part of my question, by the time January 2025 comes, you're probably looking at a national debt of $36 trillion. If you remember, if you remember history, Greece, when they went broke, do you remember the riots, the canceled pensions, and the tumultuous existence that they had in Greece? We're getting ready to mimic Greece. They had an austerity measure. What would you do with if you went into the Oval Office with a $36 trillion national debt? How are we going to deal with it? Thank you.
Thank you. So let's do the energy first. So first of all, I do know about nuclear fusion, and I see the benefits to it, and I think it is something that we need to pursue. I don't want government doing that. I want the private sector doing that. And I think we need to get used to where the private sector is doing more. I believe government breaks more than it fixes every time. They're more expensive, they're slower, they don't get the results we need. But I do think we need to partner with the private sector on all things that would help us in reference to the environment. They want to do it. They've always wanted to do it. What they don't want is to be mandated to do it. And so, yes, we are going to open up as much research as we can to try and get that and try and get not just that solution, but other solutions as we go forward. When it comes to the debt, you are spot on when you talk about what that means for our country. Everybody talks about how good the economy was when President Trump was in office. And it was. But at what cost? $9 trillion in 4 years. Think about that. $9 trillion in 4 years. Our kids will never forgive us for what happened. So you look at the situation we're in now. If we keep going the way we're going, in a couple of years, we'll be spending more on our interest than we will on our defense budget. Guess what happens if our enemies see that? All of a sudden, that becomes a national security threat. Because what has always made us a superpower is the strength of the dollar. And right now, if we don't do something, we're going to lose that strength, and that is going to be national security. So that is why we have to deal with the economy day one. We've got to stop the spending, stop the borrowing, eliminate any earmarks. We have to focus on what we need to do to get out of our agencies. And I'll tell you, it's not what I say, it's what I've done. So I will do, as president, exactly what I did as governor, but on the bigger scale. So the first thing I did when I came into office was I said, I want to control what I can control first. And that was my agencies. So I went in, replaced the head of every agency, whether they were doing a good job or not, to freshen it up. And the people I put at the heads of those agencies, some of them didn't even vote for me. I put the best and brightest who knew the constituency. So if you were in agriculture, it was someone who knew agribusiness, the challenges and the successes. If you were in the Veterans Agency, it was a veteran who had experienced all of it and knew what the pitfalls were that they go through. Every one of those, they had to understand the constituency. The second thing I did, I sent people into every agency to clean it up, pull down old regs, pull down bureaucracy, get rid of problem children, and make sure that we got them mission focused again. Because the agencies, especially in DC, they're doing more than they should be doing. They're trying to be all things to all people. We'll get all of that extra programs, bureaucracy, all of those things out. The next thing I did was I gave them 90-day benchmarks. They had to start showing a return on investment to the taxpayer. Why were they there? What were they doing? And what were they giving back to the taxpayer because of it? And then I saw they were spending because they were worried they weren't going to get the same amount of money the next year. So I put all of their spending online for the taxpayers to see. And then I incentivized them to give money back to the taxpayers. And magic happened because they started to compete against each other on who could be the most efficient and the most productive for taxpayers. That is this is going to have to be an inside out cleaning up. And then I went to my legislature and said, now it's your turn. And I started off by giving them a couple of easy things to pass so they could remember what it was like to win again. We're going to need to do that in D.C. And then I started giving them harder and harder things. We have to really take this very seriously because this is when I say our children's lives are at stake, this is really important to our national security, to our economic strength, to the ability to be a superpower, to our ability to defend ourselves, and to get back on track. But we have to acknowledge first we have a problem, and Republicans and Democrats have both done that to us, and we've got to make sure we take them both on. And I took both Republicans and Democrats on as governor. And it didn't matter if they didn't like me because I knew I was working for the taxpayer. And at the end of the day, if the taxpayers were happy, that's all that mattered. And that's what I'll do as president. Yes.
Hello, Ambassador Haley. I saw you speak at St. Anselm when you launched your economic policy. Your stamina amazes me. Anyways, my question is, a 2020 Pew Research poll says only 1 out of 10 high school students can identify the 5 basic rights given to us under the First Amendment. How would you as president encourage constitutional literacy in our schools nationwide? Because myself and a classmate who is working this event had to take what we called New Hampshire studies. It was constitutional and state history. But when I got to college at St. Anselm, many of my friends never took even a class on the Constitution. How would you as president endorse and promote constitutional literacy, which is the backbone of our democracy in our public schools and schools in general?
It's a great question. You know, when I said we were going to move federal programs down to the state level, a lot of that is K through 12 education. So when you go and you move that down, you're getting rid of the strings and you're going back to the basics. Because we've got to go back to math, science, history, reading. We've got to do STEM. We need to do arts, but we need to make sure we have financial literacy and other things. But I'd rather the states handle that. The problem is the Department of Education has decided what is important for our kids and what's not. And I think that's the problem. If the states have it, the states are going to focus on what we really need to learn. Remember when I talked about vocational classes? The vocational classes in South Carolina would be very different than the vocational classes in New Hampshire. That's the way it's supposed to be. So that's how we'll do that. So instead of trying to get this big bureaucratic agency in D.C. to change the programming, to get a bunch of bureaucrats to decide that you need to learn about the Constitution, that'll take years and a whole lot of money. Instead, if we sent that money down to the states, that would be the first thing. The second thing is presidents typically meet with their governors once a year. I will meet with our governors once a quarter, Republican and Democrat, with the sole focus of when we send those programs down, the best ways that they can use it and the best ways they can think about it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When I told you we had thousands of people on welfare, I went and matched up the people on welfare that would be sitting on the couch with our businesses. And I said, if you will take this person and train them for X number of weeks, I'll pay for it. That's the amount of time they'd be sitting on the couch. And at the end, you decide if you want to hire them or not. We moved 35,000 people from welfare to work. We had family celebrations because in a lot of cases, this was a generational cycle. They didn't know any different. And a lot of times they don't know where to find the training. And businesses didn't know where to find the workers. So we matched it up, and then they became productive members of society. Same thing with our prison systems. I wanted to know what happened to people when they got in, what they did when they were there, and what happened when they left. And so what I did was I went into men's prisons, women's prisons, maximum security prisons, all of them, to learn it. And we reformed the whole thing. We started putting in computer classes. We taught them resume building. We did financial planning. We did family planning. We gave them faith-based programs if they wanted them. But we put equipment behind the fence, and we taught them a skill. Now in South Carolina, when someone leaves the fence, they've got a job to go to the next day. They have the lowest recidivism rate in the country now. That's what we have to do. The goal is to lift up everybody, not just a certain segment, everybody. When you do that, everybody's back working in the system again. And so by sending those programs down to the states and saying, this is how you do it, you're empowering people in those states to be better, not just rely on government to do one more thing poorly.
Hi, I'm just an old plum dumber or dumb plumber. But Nikki, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
You present yourself very well. And that's why I'm here, because I wanted to see you, like most of these people, and make up my mind, are you real? I was a Trump supporter. We're going to be honest with each other. And more than a Trump supporter, like 10 people in the world have his personal cell phone. I'm one. But you may become President of the United States. What a lot of people don't understand yet, what they're doing to Donald Trump, if they take him off the ballot in so many states, he can't get enough electoral votes to win. It's impossible. And so that means we want a president that can get the job done. And so I'm going to, if Donald Trump doesn't have a chance because of those son of a bitches, I'm going to put my effort into your campaign and you, because I think you're a very competent person. You've shown me, you've answered a lot of different questions. And the biggest question I have for you, would you close the border day one?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for that. Go tell your friends and family. We appreciate that. The second thing is when it comes to what happened, I do have to say this. When it comes to what happened with Colorado, I will defeat President Trump fair and square. But I don't think kicking him off the ballot is the way I want to win. And I think that's incredibly dangerous for our democracy. No judges should decide who can and can't be on the ballot. The problem that I have that's happening in America is they think that the American people aren't smart enough. I trust you. I trust you to make good decisions. I trust you to do what's in your best interest. I don't think government can tell you how to live your life better than you can. And I think that if you put Donald Trump on the ballot, I don't think he's going to win anyway. But I don't think that we need judges to go throw him off in order to do that. The second thing that you asked about was the border. Yes, absolutely. I need to put him in a commercial. I need to put him in a commercial. So, yes, on the border, we will close it day one. I can't say enough how unbelievably irresponsible it is to let one person cross the border without being vetted, without being processed, any of that. We can't do that. It is literally, when I say a dereliction of duty, I don't know how Biden hasn't had to pay a price for this. And the only reason they're paying attention to it now is because of the perception, not because he thinks anything's wrong. He just gave 500,000 Venezuelans temporary protective status. That's 500,000 social security numbers. That's 500,000 driver's licenses. I can tell you for a fact, all that does, they pick up their cell phones and they call their family members and tell them that's what happened. It's incentive to keep coming. We've got to stop the incentive. If they see that when they get here, they're going to be sent right back home, they will stop coming and they'll do it the right way. We're not opposed to legal immigration, but people don't get to jump the line and decide that they're going to do it just because they couldn't wait any longer.
Man, we have time for one more question.
Oh, make it a great one.
Oh, well, it's a twofer. You didn't say I couldn't do two. I actually have a whole list.
Oh,
but
geez.
I recently traveled up and down the East Coast. I drive professionally locally, and I drive all over the country all the time. I'm all about state rights. The A word became a state's issue. That's great. You talk about education, state's issue, of course. But Second Amendment is federal. Right now, New Hampshire has constitutional carry. We are doing what the Constitution says. I'm tired of locking state to state. I got to have it in pieces, and then I don't have to have it in pieces as long as it's in the right box. And I can have it in the trunk, but I can't have it in the bed of the trunk. And I get to a border, and I'm like, oh shit, where? I got to like figure out what law I'm in, and I'm Googling. The gun rights have to become federal. Stop it. We need to stop it with every state gets to come up with their own version of it. Because right now, and we've only had constitutional carry since Chris Nunu 2017, he's not running again. Another governor might not be as strong as Second Amendment. I told Chris to his face a few years ago, whatever other mistakes he might make, everybody makes mistakes. If he leaves us our Second Amendment, everything else will fall into place. That was why I was such a supporter. I fear for what that's doing. So it can't keep being a state's right, a state's issue. But that's sort of a question, but more.
Yes, of course. So first of all, I am a concealed weapons permit holder myself. So I can tell you that in South Carolina, it was so hard to get reciprocity with different states. We passed bill after bill to try and get different reciprocity, but you're exactly right. Not only is it hard to know what the next state does, it's hard to know where it's allowed, on school grounds, not on school grounds, any other place. And so there does need to be a more uniform way of doing that. What I will tell you is I will always fight to protect Second Amendment rights, because I think that the one thing we have to do, we will fight to get stolen guns off the street. We will fight to hold criminals accountable. We will fight to have the backs of our law enforcement. But we need to also fight for the fact that people have the right to protect themselves and protect their families. And we can't ever take that away from them because of other lawlessness that's happening. It's making people want to make sure they're more protected because of it. And so, no, you will always have your Second Amendment rights protected, whether the state by state or whether it's federal. I'll do everything I can to make sure that you can get what you need to be able to protect yourself. Yes, you can do your second question.
It's important, and I get nothing from my state reps, my state senators. We essentially, up in Coos County, we essentially don't have federal senators and federal Congress because, and this is part of the reason why. We're in New Hampshire, we voted a Republican governor, Republican House, a Republican state House, Republican Executive Council. Yet we continually have a Democrat congressman and Democrat senators, and I think that a huge part of that is UOCAVA. My son is Army infantry. I'm all for his right to vote when he's deployed. I plan to be in Ireland next November. I sure as heck want to cast my ballot from out of the country. It's abused. There's people 30 years outside of this country married and voting in their new country that still have the right to vote. The houses that they lived in were torn down decades ago. There's highways over them. There's one woman specifically that some of the people here might know about. I've contacted everybody that I could, from Sununu, anybody that has an office or anything in Concord. Chuck Morse, everybody. Nobody will do anything about it. That UOCAVA is not 100% abuse. That's an exaggeration. UOCAVA needs to be reined in. It started with the military, so they have the right to vote. Overseas college students and stuff like that. Now, someone who moves, say I go to Ireland, I fall in love. I'm a little old to be having kids, but hypothetically I have a kid. That kid is 20, has never been brought to the United States. That kid has the right to vote in wherever was my last residence, whether or not that's even a residence anymore, whether or not I've taken on and start voting in Ireland. It's ridiculous the number of people that vote in America who have basically shunned even being American or never really were in the first place. And that is why we keep having the federal ballots.
I will pull information on that because I'd love to know how many people we're talking about and what the activity rate is in elections and what it's not, but I promise you I'll pull the information. So I'll leave you with this. First of all, thank you for being patient, one, in waiting on me, and then two, sitting through all of this. When I first ran against that longest serving legislator in a primary, people laughed at me. And I got to work, and I earned their support, and we won. When I ran for governor, I was actually a Tea Party candidate. I ran against a lieutenant governor, an attorney general, a very popular congressman, and a state senator. I was Nikki Who. I had 3% in the polls. I had the least amount of money. But I worked South Carolina like no one else, and we won. When I got to the United Nations, they said I didn't have enough experience. And I got to work and took the kick me sign off of our backs. I have been underestimated in everything I've ever done. And it's a blessing because it makes me scrappy. No one's going to outwork me in this race. No one's going to outsmart me in this race because we have a country to save. So if you like what I had to say today, go tell 10 people. Go tell them to go to NikkiHaley.com. Go tell them to learn about what we're doing. Go tell them to go to a town hall. Go tell them to get a yard sign and get involved or volunteer. But be a part of the solution. If you don't like what I had to say today, shh. Just don't say anything and don't tell anyone you were here. Thank you very much. God bless you. I appreciate it.